All right, so we got ourselves another Behind the Vita. I'm Ted Gerard, Program Director for the Athletic Training Program. With me is co-host John Mercer, Department Chair. And then we have a special guest today. We have Dr. Arpita Basu, and she's a colleague of ours and has been a colleague of ours since 2017 in the department. And her area of, I guess, specialization is interventional nutrition. Would that be correct? And it's interesting. We were talking a little bit off the air how you've been here for 5 years, but half of this has been marred by the pandemic, and we really I feel like I haven't really got to know you too well, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you tonight because I'm intrigued by your research, and I'd like to know a little bit more about it. And just a little bit more about yourself. So welcome to Behind the Vita. Okay, I think you might be muted.
Oh, no. Okay,
No,
can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, we got you now. So,
okay.
So once again, welcome. We'll just get right into this. So the first question we usually ask people is, tell us a little bit about your history, your previous jobs, maybe something that was impactful in your schooling. Just a little background, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, thank you again, Ted and John, for this opportunity. It's always very motivating to talk about, I think, myself and kind of be on the spotlight a little bit. So it's always nice. And thank you so much. Actually, coming to UNLV has been quite a long journey for me. This was my second faculty position. So I graduated from Texas at Texas Women's University with a PhD in nutritional biochemistry. So TW is one of the very few universities in Texas that has a program in nutrition. I think it ranks third in the state, preceded by UT Austin and Texas Tech, I believe. So it's certainly one of the reputable programs in Texas. So I got my integrated master's and PhD from TW in nutritional biochemistry. And then I moved on to do my postdoctoral fellowship at UC Davis Medical Center. And I actually did that for about close to a year and a half. And I felt sort of a bit lonely because I had more family and friends near Texas, in Texas. So I was actually looking for either another postdoc position or a junior faculty position. So I had a couple of, well, I would say probably 3 positions to choose from. One was at UT Southwestern, and the other one was at, I think it was at, can't remember, probably Texas Tech. And the third one was the one that I liked most. And that was my first tenure track faculty position in nutrition at Oklahoma State University. And it was quite an experience to join Oklahoma State because it is one of the top 10 land grant universities. And I'm not sure I was quite ready for that position at that point of time. I was quite excited to get that position, but it certainly was a long and a pretty, I would say, a learning and an uphill journey, I would probably use the word. And I was very lucky to work with a lot of these senior investigators at Oklahoma State, with University of Oklahoma. Those are probably the 2 main universities in Oklahoma. And I also had some collaborations in Texas. So I had a really, I would say, productive, close to 11 years at Oklahoma State. So I joined as an assistant tenure track, and then I got my tenure there in 2012. And I was actually, what happened is, I think a part of my research was a bit affected because just to let everybody know, I realized I couldn't work with animals because I just couldn't stand the smell of rats. And I just and the very last time I was literally, well, I learned a lot, I must say, but I was sort of forced to work with animals during my PhD years because my mentor was sort of a big shot in animal models of cancer research. And I absolutely hated it in a way, though I must say I learned a lot. So, but then I decided that since I completed my PhD and moved on to my postdoc, I'm not going to do animal studies anymore. So I started working with humans, in clinical trials and in epidemiological settings, public health perspective. So for mostly at Oklahoma State, I worked a lot with clinical trials, but I think what was happening, I guess what was sort of negatively impacting my research was the position of Oklahoma State, which was in Stillwater. It was about sort of like 65 miles away from an urban city. And it was like, right in the middle out of nowhere. Probably a lot of land grant universities are like that, sort of landlocked. So I just really got a bit tired of traveling among those clinics between Oklahoma City and Tulsa and Stillwater. And I thought, I really need to move to a more health science setting, and where I could have at least, I don't have to drive for like 2 hours to attend a 1-hour meeting at Oklahoma City. So that really actually triggered after I got my tenure and I was getting towards my 5-year post-tenure review. And I just didn't even realize that, I should be looking for another job. So, but I really started thinking deeper, and I'm like, this is not helping me. I think I really need to be in a more urban setting. So that really triggered my search for a second position, so to speak. And in fact, it was a quick a decision for me at UNLV. I think I completed my 5-year post tenure review at Oklahoma State, like in February or March of 2017. And then I think it was very sudden. All of a sudden, I came across this position at UNLV with a focus in nutrition in KNS, and I then happened to meet faculty, Jessica, Dr. Nurick at experimental biology, which is sort of a flagship meeting that all of us nutritionists and a lot of us biomedical researchers go to. And then sort of Dr. Nurick really helped me, kind of gave me a really exciting picture of UNLV, that UNLV has invested a lot and there are a lot of good opportunities. So that really got me motivated, and I applied. And I think that was in April, probably in the month of May, I got, what do you call that? I guess a conference, a telephone or maybe a video conference, a quick conference with the search committee. And then I was brought to campus in June of 2017. And then I think I was offered the job in July of 2017. So that was really quick. And I'll tell you, I was really, it happened within such a short period of time. And just because I've never had that experience of like switching jobs, you know what I mean? Like right after my postdoc, that was my very first job. And I stayed there for 11 years. And I remember when I got the offer letter, I actually called up Brian and said, so what am I supposed to do? Like, is it okay for now if I just go and tell my chair at Oklahoma State that I'm taking up a new job? So I think it was Brian, and I also double checked with the dean, and both of them told me that you must sign the letter and make sure it's fully signed and return the letter before you go and tell your department chair that you're leaving and you're taking up a second job. So that was pretty hilarious, I was like, oh my gosh, it was like, I didn't realize what it takes to change a job. I guess I was so focused and sort of comfortable there. But when it all happened, and I still laugh, when I just recollect, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sure Brian and the dean thought, oh my gosh, this might be a little funny and sort of a bit stupid to them, but I'm like, I've never done this before. I just want to make sure I'm doing it right. So that was my story a little bit, and that's how I came to UNLV in 2017 and fall, and it's been a great journey since then.
That's such a great story, because in academia, people don't change jobs very often, right? So the people that work in HR and stuff, they see it all the time, right? But in academia, most people 1 or 2 times in their career, that's it. That's all they're going to switch. And so you're right. It is it's a different world when you're doing that. So I think that's really quite funny. So can we talk a little bit about your passion in research, and where your passions are now in research? Because obviously it's not rats.
No, definitely not. And that was the other reason I wanted to leave our department, because I think I was just 20% of the researchers working with humans, and 80% were of the faculty were working with rats, and the corridor just smelled of rats, and I don't like it. So, so yes, currently I'm definitely, as I just mentioned, I'm a nutritional biochemist by training, but I also did a second master's in public health because I felt that I've been just pretty focused in nutrition, did my bachelor's from India, and then I came here, did my master's and integrated PhD, and then I did my postdoc. So pretty consistent in clinical nutrition throughout. And I felt that I really need to branch out and get a little bit more interdisciplinary, not just by talking to other colleagues in other fields, but probably get a little bit more interdisciplinary training. So that's when I was very attracted to public health, and I did the certification first, and then I did my MPH from University of Oklahoma, which was just about, so I was doing all these evening classes when I was a junior faculty there. So, so pretty much my current research is focused in clinical nutrition, and the overall theme of my research, if I were to define it in one sentence, I would say role of food as medicine in chronic diseases. And of course, there are many chronic conditions, but I think all of these chronic conditions have a lot of the underlying causes that are pretty common. So I think pretty much all of it starts with being overweight, physical inactivity, moving on to obesity, adiposity. So definitely I've been focusing on diabetes and cardiovascular disease for, I would say, for the last 10 years. And I've been able to build that up here. When I moved here in 2017, I was able to get some really good collaborations with the School of Medicine here at UNLV, with the endocrinology unit and also the OBGYN. So we are doing diabetes studies, both in adults, a general adult population, and also in pregnant women who are affected, and pretty much a lot of the ethnic groups we find here, particularly the Hispanic women, unfortunately do have high rates of gestational diabetes. So that's pretty much what my research is currently focusing on, and I'm always excited about looking at effects of food as medicine.
I love that. And what I'm interested in, or even going back to your undergraduate days, what was it that got you interested in research in the first place and in this area?
Thanks, John. I think, yeah, I do get that question, and I would say a lot of it is rooted in my upbringing, because I'm originally from India, the eastern part of India, Calcutta, which is one of the big metropolitan cities, one of the 4 big metropolitan cities in India. And growing up, I think my mother has always been a big advocate of yoga and naturopathic medicine and eating healthy and all of that. I remember when we used to have fever, I mean, my mother would give us homeopathic medicine rather than take a conventional, like a Tylenol kind of medicine. So I think it was very sort of ingrained in us that we want to do something natural that's preventive. So I was always wavering between medicine and starting from high school, medicine and nutrition, or nutrition and public health. So those are the areas I was wavering between. But then I realized that I'm not going to be enjoying doing a lot of the things that the physicians do after I did my shadowing and decided to either stay in India or come here and do the laboratory part of research. One of the things I must say is, and that's probably might be relevant to a lot of the other global communities, like what I found in India, is nutrition itself, or even some of the other allied health professions, are not quite recognized. So, well, if you fall sick, you need to go to the physician, and the physician will give you all of the advice that you need. And I don't think so at that point of time, the academic setting in India was really into, like, they even recognized or had those setups to do advanced nutrition research, something that I was very excited about. And I think the role of food as medicine, particularly in preventive medicine, was something very attractive to me. And I was really excited about these food-based research that was going on in some of the universities. Particularly at that point of time, TW had many of those antioxidant-based research. And one of the reasons I moved to UC Davis for my postdoc is pretty much the nutrition group at UC Davis has been one of the pioneers in like looking at dark chocolate research and berries and all kinds of foods that you can think of, with antioxidant effects. So they were pretty like high on that. And even at Nutrition at Oklahoma State has quite a reputation for these different kinds of foods, looking at not only in animal models, but also in human trials. So I would say, kind of going back to your question, the undergraduate years, I think it's really my upbringing that I owe it a lot to my mom and dad, who's been extremely supportive of my career goals, and they have never really, well, they always gave me the tools, but never really coerced me, or rather forced me to pick one over the other. And in fact, I remember my friends and relatives were like, nutrition, what is that? I mean, why would you study that? I mean, is that medicine? Would you be a doctor? I mean, what kind of a doctor, So those were the kind of reactions and comments I got from India. And now I can relate to that very well.
Yeah, it must be really frustrating, and I think you alluded to it already, is the world of nutrition and even in allied health is often looked down upon by the medical establishment. And, obviously I have lots of friends in sports medicine and physicians, and, they tell me that like, they know nothing about nutrition. They maybe it was a half day of one of their courses on nutrition, and they have athletes asking them about nutrition and they don't know how to answer it. And definitely not for preventative. This is, that's even a bigger piece. And I think that our culture and our cultural idiosyncrasies are really, they're big. These are big picture things, and people trust their physicians, but their physicians don't know. And people like yourself that are researching this area, right? And that these are actually not difficult interventions, right? Like eat more berries, right?
Right.
Like that's an easy message, right? But how do you get that? And I know that we're going a little bit off script here, but how do you get your research, and not even just your research, but your area of research, into the cultural sort of lexicon of medicine? And it's difficult, right?
Yes, certainly there are challenges, and there are challenges with the physician practitioners, also with the funding agencies. I feel the federal agencies, other than USDA, which is very focused in food and agriculture and food systems, I think NIH itself it's quite biased towards medical research and molecular based research. I'm not sure if you look at the whole pie. I think the percentage of funds that go to nutrition or physical activity based research is still, I think, a small percentage compared to the whole pie. So definitely, I think we show results, and that's probably the reasons I would say a lot of my trials I was successful in getting some of the external funding. I would say is collaborating with the physician scientists. And I think that strategy has worked out well. And I think when they see the effects themselves, I remember doing my gestational diabetes study with my first grant here at UNLV. Some of the physicians at OBGYN were like, "Oh, blueberries, what will blueberries do? I mean, it's not going to change everything." I said, "Well, you can't change everything, but maybe you can change a few things that will help, especially these mothers, manage their diabetes better and the risks of having complications." And this is a critical time when we're talking about the whole future of that unborn child. And we know this is so many complications during diabetes affecting pregnancy. So maybe we can do something. So, and that was the first clinical trial in nutrition that we started at the School of Medicine and at OBGYN. And they were actually surprised to see how really the patients loved the intervention, and they had never participated in that kind of study before. And they were actually coming back even after we completed the study. They were like, oh, how do I get my blueberries, and how do I continue the study? So we actually told them, yes, according to the IRB rules, of course, you can get these blueberries anywhere you want, and just keep eating healthy. And of course, we gave them nutrition education handouts and tips and physical education tips and all of that. But I think it's about working with the physicians. I think that's where, and I sort of have had this training, I would say, from UC Davis, maybe because I did my postdoc under a MD physician mentoring at UC Davis, and I worked with quite a few physician scientists there. In fact, at University of Oklahoma, where I moved in as a junior faculty, I was fortunate to have a lot of mentoring from a lot of the endocrinologists. So I think it's about that culture, getting them involved, making them see, hey, you know what, this is not some kind of a voodoo stuff, we are doing, this works, and it's not about changing the whole diet. And a lot of the times I find physicians say, oh, I don't know how to, people don't change diet. They're really pessimistic about it. I said, no, there's got to be a right way of, motivating them, and you can't change everything. I'm a nutritionist by training, but I'm not going to change my entire diet, but I can probably make 2 or 3 changes. So I think it's about the point you made, Ted, is really helpful, is getting that culture of or introducing nutrition into the medical education and culture. I think that's really what I'd like to even build up here at the School of Medicine.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's like so critical, and we see it in sports medicine all the time. And I think that I'm in a world where we're talking about mostly athletes and trying to perform at their highest level. They're really quite interested, and still there's like there's a lack of availability to good information.
I think there's just too much information.
There's
this
too
is
much
information overload. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, I love the information that you provide, like things like, hey, simple interventions, right? Like add some berries into your diet. Like that's not a hard thing to do. And it's funny, right? The research that I read is like, when you add something like that, you naturally take something away. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not, so these are things that people can do. Like I even have friends that I've worked with on just little things like, well, what do you eat for breakfast? And I'm like, well, I have oatmeal and an egg and maybe some berries. And like, oh, you have berries for breakfast? I'm like, yeah, of course I do. Oh, that sounds pretty easy. It's not a big move, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
It was pretty eye-opening, particularly for this first GDM study that I did at the School of Medicine here at UNLV, that we gave them even simple tips, like just cut out fruit juice, just try to make a juice with the fresh berries, just don't buy them. And fortunately, there are many WIC participants, and they would go for the juice because it tastes good. It's got all these added sugars and just little tips like that. And we did see significant effects. Those in the intervention group actually gained much less weight compared to the control group. So yes, both, and that's very common in pregnancy to gain weight, but it's the amount of weight that you're gaining, which puts a lot of metabolic pressure or metabolic burden, I would say, on both the mother and the baby. So it was pretty encouraging to see that little things like this can make a big difference, especially, people who are not, maybe we can say, not at a high level advantage of having access to superfoods or functional foods all the time. They depend on WIC and other federal sources of support. But I think within that framework, there's still a lot of work to be done.
It's interesting to me because like easy things like strawberries are superfoods, right? They're just not expensive superfoods with like the label of like acai berries or goji berries. Like they're not exotic.
Right, they're not exotic.
Superfoods.
Yeah, I'm curious. I love the passion about research and the training that you've had and the training you give students. I'm wondering how you bring research into the classroom as you're training students. How do you do that? Because obviously with nutrition and even exercise, there's so much anecdotal and so much marketing information out there that we're up against. How do you pull the research into the classroom?
Right, and yes, great question, John, because I think I'm learning every time I teach an undergraduate as well as a graduate class. I try to do it in different ways for the two category of students. But I think the first and foremost things I do is select. I would probably use the word, I carefully select articles for students, and I post them for their weekly readings. And I actually assign points for students to make sure they are reading and discussing those original research articles as part of the class assignments. And they're actually not only presenting and discussing it themselves, but they're actually, I try to make it, I try to sort of design it in a way that each student is actually teaching something to the entire class. And they come up with at least some important questions. So each student gets about no more than 10 minutes to discuss and present the gist of each article, but then they have to come up with some teaching points and questions. And the goal is to, and I usually do the article selection from the instructor perspective, so that it sort of aligns well with the topic of discussion for that particular class or for that particular session. And then I also make sure that we have a lot of discussion around research, because one of the questions I always get is, there's so much information overload. Which is the best thing to do? Which is the best diet to follow? What is the best recommendation? And there are so many variabilities, and that's very common when we talk about humans. I mean, we are never ever going to see identical results, for a clinical trial done in Northwest part of the country versus Southern US or Midwest. So we have so many variabilities, but again, we look at the study design. So I really try to come up with theme topics and questions and make students involved, let them speak. Because I think students try to shy away from research initially. That's what I've seen, particularly in undergraduate classes and even with grad students, they feel a little bit hesitant. I'm like, well, let's just discuss it. Research is, I think I try to present it to students in a way that I really want to make them comfortable, and which is the way it should be. I don't think research is confined to funded researchers only. I think all of us can do research in different ways. We can challenge, we can question the evidence base, and we can even look at data. There are secondary data analyses that can be done where you don't have to be one of the established researchers to do that. So I think that is what I try to get to the students, make them more comfortable, and of course I think the key to that is making them discuss research more comfortably. And I think the last point I'll add to that is, how does all of that relate to their practice? I get both practitioners and aspiring practitioners in my class. So it's like, well, there are RDs who are practicing for 5 years, or they want to come back and get their master's now, as well as they are personal trainers. So how does all of this make sense? What is the take-home message you're going to get from these significant findings of this reputable research articles in JAMA Internal Medicine? But how are you going to take that to the real world? And do you think this is really important? Because we don't always have to accept, just because it's in a top tier journal doesn't mean it's always useful research. I disagree with that, because I think there is a lot of publication bias in the reported literature. Because a lot of the times, unfortunately, in my own experience, which doesn't make me happy, there are journals with very good impact factor. They don't want to accept findings, particularly from clinical trials, that are not significant. And this is highly problematic, because if we are only reporting significant studies, we ourselves in the academic community, we are creating a huge publication bias. And then that's driving the practice, because we are telling students it's evidence-based. Well, if the evidence is biased, that's no good. Mm-hmm. So I try to, sort of drill these things and try to have a useful discussion around research.
Well, that is such a great point. Really great.
So I have one last question for you, and this is the fun one. So, and I have no idea the answer to this one, by the way, is, so when you're not doing blueberry, strawberry research. You're not teaching class. You're not doing service at the university. What do you do outside of the world of academia? What do you like to do?
That's why I think I love Henderson. I live in Henderson. There's a beautiful park right across my my apartment complex, and I like to go there for walks. I love doing yoga. As I said, that's kind of ingrained in me. I remember coming back from school, and my mom would make sure that I did yoga for 30 minutes and then took showers. So that's sort of ingrained. I love meditation. So I kind of start the day with at least 15, 20 minutes, and I try to end the day. That's how I do it. And I just love reading all kinds of spiritual and religious books. It gives me a lot of positive ideas and inspirations. I must say I'm not in particular a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. And when people talk about, one of the things I've realized over my years as a faculty and just as a human being going through these areas of training and expectations and what is top tier, middle tier, and low tier, and all of those segregations, unfortunately, is mental health is so important. And oftentimes, we just we ignore that. And I think that gets reflected in many ways. And I try not to be biased myself in any way. And so, all the way from Joel Osteen's lectures to some Hinduism thoughts and anything that's motivating. I just love to read about spirituality and religion. So there's a ton of books I've accumulated, and that gives me a lot of positivity. And I just like basking in the sun. And those are the things I do. And if I have a little bit of time, I love to travel. So just, I guess, tied to my interests here that I just mentioned, Sedona is my favorite place. So definitely I go there. I really love to visit Sedona. I know I'm going to be doing soon now that the weather is getting nice. And I love to just be there in those, some of those rocks that have, just a lot of positive energy. Whether people say whether it's all in your mind, I said, well, if it's all in my mind and I feel good about it, then definitely I'm doing something good to my mind and my mental health. So those are the things I do that keep me going. So
in 2 weeks from now, spring break is going to happen. You'll be in Sedona?
Well, probably not for spring break. I don't have a lot to do. But soon after. It's not that far from here. Yeah.
It is really not. And it is a wonderful place. The only thing that bothers me when I go there, it just seems so busy all the time. Like you can't get into the grocery store. You can't get into a restaurant. It's crazy busy. But I mean, the outside part there is absolutely breathtaking. I agree with you. All right. Well, thank you so much. We promised we'd keep this to about a half hour. Really appreciate your time. I feel like I've gotten to know you a little bit better, and I just love this conversation. We need to continue some of this talk outside of the podcast, because there's more I'd like to ask you in the future. So I hope you have some time for me.
Thank you so much, Ted and Sean. And it was a great pleasure, and it's always fun to talk about things and sort of relate them together. So thank you again.
You're welcome. All right. Hope you have a good Monday evening and a good week ahead. And so thank you once again. And we'll say goodbye. And we'll be off in a couple of weeks. We'll have our next Behind the Vita. So thank you all.
Thanks, Arpita. Bye.